Good morning, everyone. Not only is Sharon a hard act to follow, but she's also one of our board members. So I've, got to mind my P's and Q's. And I think I will say up front that I've been approached to make this speech personally about, I guess, my leadership journey, and I might put forward some opinions that are my opinions and not necessarily the official Growcom line. I'm not going to be too outrageous.
I'm not here in Growcom capacity.
I know. But, and I think most of you probably are aware of who or what Growcom is, probably because you've been having a few chats with Anna over your time in this course. So I won't go too much into the background to Growcom, except to say that it's a pretty old organisation. It's been in existence since 1923, when it was the Committee of Direction of Fruit Marketing, which just rolls off the tongue really. And also, it's the largest, as I'm aware, well, it's the only organisation in Australia that actually represents all commodities in fruit, vegetables and nuts, rather than single commodities. So it is unique, and I guess we think that we have a unique voice that we bring to the table. So that's just the little Growcom blurb. And now on to the most exciting bit, all about me, of course. So I guess my job title, as you heard, is Chief Advocate. Now, when I first took on that role, I didn't really like that title. I thought it sounded a bit funny and didn't really sit well with me. But I think as I've been in it for a while, I've kind of become a lot more accustomed to it. And I guess it really does explain what I do. And my role is to advocate on behalf of Queensland's fruit, vegetable and nut growers to government and to the community, importantly. And sometimes we forget about the community because they're the ones who politicians listen to, and we need to really have the support and backing of the community, not just the rural community but the broader community, to ensure that our industry can actually flourish and develop in the way that we want it to. And I think that I'm really lucky to have this role. I really enjoy it, and I guess I was doing some reading about different roles, and one of the things they said, there's sort of three categories of people. There are people who have jobs, there are people who have careers, and I think jobs, they're the people you go and you work and you get money and you go home, and you don't really care about what the job is. It's just to get the money and to support you in your basic function. And then you've also got people who have careers, and careers are people who come in and they say, well, I'm really strategic. By the time I'm 40, I'd like to be a CEO, so I'm going to, work here for a couple of years, and I'm, really building my CV as I go, and that's where I'm, going to end up. And I think we can be, or all have observed people like that. And then there are people who have their role as their calling. So it's passionate. It's something that you believe in. It's something that when you go to work, it's not just about ticking the box or warming the seat. It's about actually doing something that you believe in. And I think that I'm really lucky because I really believe in what I do. I think that the fruit and vegetable and nut industries, I have to always remember the nutters, they get a bit cross if I don't. The fruit, vegetable and nut guys, it's a really important, amazing industry. And all of us, I think, could say that we probably all should eat a little bit more fruit and vegetables. There's no kind of negative to it. And I think that's an amazing thing. And I think that we have an industry that has so much potential, and that we are very lucky collectively to be working in and for. And I think you guys are lucky to be able to participate in this program. When I came along last year, I was a bit of a last minute invite to be a speaker, and I just came and I was absolutely blown away by the things that you guys are doing in this course and the opportunities that it offers you. And in fact, I kind of said to Anna, you've got to get yourself on this course, because I think that it exposes you to opportunities that I wish that I'd had earlier on in my working life. So I guess Chief Advocate, how did I get here? It's not the kind of thing that when you're 3 years old and someone says, what do you want to be when you grow up? You say, oh, hi, I'd like to be a Chief Advocate. So I think my current pick when I was 3 was fireman. So, but how did I get here? So I grew up on a farm, actually not far from Sharon really, but on the other side of the hill, the non-fruit and vegetable growing side of the Laidley Range. And we had a small property with beef cattle. But my parents were both teachers, so we were never entirely reliant on the farm for income. And I think that does actually make a big difference. I was a little bit weather obsessed. I think for my 8th birthday I asked for a rain gauge for my birthday. And I'm still a little bit, keen to look at the bomb weather reports and find out what things are happening. But I really valued that country upbringing. I really valued the opportunity to be in the wide, I know it's all a cliche in a lot of ways, but the wide open spaces. I had a mother who was a working mum, a full-time teacher, but she was also really into her cows, and she was the main one who ran the business, and she knew every single one of those cows by name, and she, it was her thing that she really enjoyed and she really loved, and I was really lucky to be able to grow up looking at that. And then I was the kind of kid who, did quite well at school but really didn't know what they wanted to be, couldn't actually make a decision, so I actually went to university and studied science and journalism. So, not wanting to have a bit of a bet each way there. But it's actually worked out really well for me. And whilst I knew from about the first 15 minutes of my first journalism lecture that I never, ever, ever wanted to be a journalist, it was actually really useful for me to have that experience learning about the media and how it works and all of those kind of things. Because in my role now, dealing with the media and working with the media is a really important facet of my role, and I also do press releases. I do a lot of stuff, a lot of live to air, country air, and every now and then I even, much to my irritation, go on television, which I don't particularly like. I much prefer radio, and it's quite daunting, and I think it is useful to have media experience. And I would urge any of you, if you, in your roles you are required to interact with the media, go and get some media training. It can be expensive, and I've sort of been lucky enough to be given the opportunity to do the very expensive media training where they film you while you're doing all that kind of thing, and it makes a huge difference. And I think if you can put your point across eloquently and be comfortable in those situations and not be flummoxed by journalists' questions, then you have a really good opportunity to put forward the best case for the industry or whoever you're trying to promote. So that's just a little bit of advice, I guess. After I went to uni and did my muddled up degrees, then of course I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I went to be a backpacker. And I didn't pick any fruit though. I worked in a restaurant, and then I worked in a large financial company in London, which was just like completely trippy for somebody from a little farm down in Queensland. And but I'm glad that I had that experience. I lived over there for 2 years and came back, and I was just lucky that a friend of mine was working for the Queensland government in fisheries. And so I got a job as the Queensland Project Officer for the control of exotic pest fish. And as I used to say at the time, not many people get to have the word exotic in their job title and not have anything to do with a pole. So I was pretty lucky in that role. It was a really good role for me. It was a project. I had my own sort of autonomy, and I was quite young, and I had a boss who really, let me push myself as far as I wanted to go. And it was really, even though the technical name of the job was fisheries scientist, it was really a policy role. So I got my first experience of actually working in policy in government. And I really felt I learned an important lesson there, because I think public servants get knocked. It's easy to knock public servants. It's easy to say, oh, they're just, there's too many of them, they're just warming the seat, they're bureaucrats, blah, 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 blah. And some of those criticisms are accurate. But there's a lot of people in the public service who are passionate and are committed and are really trying to do the best thing for their industry. And I think it's really important that we remember that, and that when we are trying to achieve our goals by influencing policy outside of the public service, that we need to find those people within the public service who have the same passion and commitment and interest, that we can work with them to further our shared goals, I guess. So it is easy to say, oh, yeah, there's such pains and bureaucracy and blah, 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 blah. And I can assure you, for a lot of the public servants, they think exactly the same thing. They are burdened by all the forms they have to fill and all of that kind of thing. So again, I think I just had a stroke of good luck falling into that job, and it taught me a lot. And then I moved out of that role. I moved into a role actually in research management. So I worked for an organisation called the Coastal Cooperative Research Centre, which no longer exists, but it was basically set up to look at anything that could impact on the health of the coast. So we looked at anything from, local government planning, development, overcrowding in cities. We looked at, beach erosion. We looked at a whole range of things. But one of the things that we focused on, and I guess this was a bit of a defining moment for me, was the fact that the biggest landholders or the biggest custodians of our land who have the biggest impact on our environment are farmers. And if we can't work with farmers to help them and facilitate them to manage the land in the way that collectively as a community people say they want, then any environmental aspiration will fail. Locking up, national parks, doing all of those other things, protected areas, all of that's fine and it's nice and it's good. But if we can't work with farmers to facilitate them to be the best land managers they can, then you can chuck the rest out the window. So that was a big, important moment for me, and I guess that was where I made the step into this industry. And I took on a role 10 years ago, actually. My 10-year anniversary at Growcom is next month. So, and I would have to say, looking back at who I was at that point, that I thought of it as a career move. Whereas now, I guess it has become that passion. So I've actually had a shift as a consequence of working in the organisation. So I came in there, it was my first management role, and we did a lot of stuff, building some of the programs that we're now delivering around the farm management system that Growcom has. And my role was really to work with government on government projects and work with the landholders to deliver outcomes. And I guess the biggest one that I've been involved in was the development of what was originally called the Res2 program, and I think that's when the passion bit me. That's when I suddenly had the shift, and I poured my heart and soul into that because it seemed so unfair that farmers were getting absolutely flogged for what they were doing and its impact on the reef, but there was no support, there was no decent extension, there was nothing. It was just, farmers are killing the reef, farmers are bad, we should get rid of the farmers. And so with my colleague in the sugar industry, we worked very hard and lobbied, not just me, and I have to give some credit to the regional and own groups, but from industry it was myself and Tim Wrigley from sugar. We basically, pulled together this package, and in the 2007 election, Rudd committed $400 million for a package to deliver incentives across the reef to improve water quality. And I have to say, for me, that's my proudest moment, in that we saw something that needed to happen and a group of us got together and worked really hard collectively, lobbied government, pulled together the scientific program, wrote, I was living, dreaming it. I was just, it was my life at that point, and I am really proud that it got up. And that program, in some form or another, has continued to this day. And I think, there has been a shift in thinking, in that there is an understanding that if you have an expectation that people are going to deliver an environmental outcome, that all of us as members of the community benefit from, that there has to be some support for that. And that's, I guess, the shift in thinking that we're looking for. So I was the land and water manager. That was what I did. Then I moved into an operations manager role, still sort of doing similar things, but pulling in more kind of industry development roles into my area. And I became very close to the pineapple industry, who I am now particularly close to still. And because in the complexity that is the horticulture world, we are what is known as the peak industry body for pineapples. So we have a unique and special relationship with the pineapple industry, as well as our broader relationship with the rest of industry. And it's been great for me because I, like Sharon, have sat on, I used to be on the old HAL Industry Advisory Committee for pineapples, and now we're going to have our first meeting of the Strategic Industry Advisory Panel, SIAP, in July, so that's another role with pineapples. So I guess I feel like I've been with the pineapple industry ever since they had a levy and have been part of the decision-making processes around their R&D levy. So that's been really rewarding for me, and I've really enjoyed learning and being part of that. What's depressing is that when you have $240,000 worth of R&D funds, you don't buy very much. So, there are some very serious constraints, and I'll touch on that in a minute. And then in 2009, I was pretty lucky in that the person who had been in my role moved on, and the leadership at Growcom at that time took a bit of a chance on me and gave me the opportunity to step up into the chief advocate role, and I rewarded them so nicely by 7 months later going on maternity leave. So, but I'm still here, and I think like I said, I have a passion for this role. I love it, and I'm committed to it, and I think in the last few years there's been some really good changes and some things that I think have been of benefit, and I think one of those is around a role like mine in our organisation. In terms of advocacy specifically, there's me. The CEO doesn't work in that area, and obviously all of the team contribute, but in terms of having it, and I also manage a couple of projects as well, but there's one person. So I have to make a community outside of my actual workplace in terms of a community of people who I speak to, and bounce ideas off around advocacy stuff. And I think I'm really fortunate in that. I don't know how many of you know them, but I've got a couple of different communities that I lock into, and one of them is the other state farming bodies. So there's New South Wales Farmers, there's VFF, there's Vegetables WA, and now Northern Territory Farmers, and to a lesser extent Tasmanian Farmers and Graziers, and they're all the actual state members of AusVeg along with ourselves. And I don't think I'll be telling any tales out of school necessarily that up until fairly recently AusVeg has been rather difficult to engage with as an organisation in and of itself, but that's going through a big process of reform at the moment. But the state members, we've actually worked together really well on a number of issues. So we just have an informal group where we have a teleconference probably once every 6 weeks or so and say, there's an issue. This time we're going to talk about the Horticulture Code of Conduct, and we thrash that out. And each of us has sort of different specialities and skills and networks and all of that kind of thing. And it's great. I love talking to those guys. It's an opportunity for me it's like having, a really great set of colleagues, except none of them actually work in the same workplace. And I think if you're doing an advocacy role or in any kind of role in where you might be by yourself, it's really important to create perhaps a virtual network for yourself to support you. And those guys are my friends. I might only see them once a year. In fact, I'll probably be seeing them later this week. But they're a really important network to me. The other one that I think is important, and I have to give one of our board directors credit for this, and I'll be a little bit honest, you guys work in horticulture, so you know that horticulture is often characterised by lots of people standing and cheering on their own dung heap, for want of a better word, and not necessarily working with the other dung heaps. And one of my board directors, we set up a thing called the Queensland Horticulture Council, which is recognising that there's a number of bodies, such as the one that this Anna works for, up in Bowen Gumloo, that have a really legitimate and strong connection to their regional communities, and that we were not tapping into them. And we were having a lot of issues where Growcom would say, well, Minister, we're the voice of horticulture in Queensland, and we say blah, blah, blah. And then somebody would come down from Mareeba and go, well, the Mareeba growers think blah, blah, blah. And often it wouldn't be particularly different, but it would be enough different for the minister to go, this horticulture mob, they can't get their story straight. One says A, the other says B. What are we going to do here? I just won't listen to them and make my own mind up. So pulling together this thing called the Queensland Horticulture Council has been a really important step, I think, in getting better cooperation across the regions in Queensland. So now when we go to the minister in Queensland and say, this is what Queensland Horticulture thinks about biosecurity, the Queensland minister can say, all right, and she'll ring Joe up in Mareeba and he'll go, yep, blah, 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 party line. she'll ring Carl and he'll go blah, 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 but it will still be the party line. And he'll ring Bundaberg. She'll ring Bundaberg, and we'll have the same story. And I think that's made a very big difference, both to how other industries see us and to how government sees us. And I'm really happy with how that's working, and like I said, I do have to give a lot of credit to one of our board directors for doing that, and I have to give a lot of credit to the regional organisations for being willing to participate and being so open about being part of that. The other thing that we have is a thing called the Tropical Horticulture Group. So that's all the commodity groups. So we've got horticulture in the regions, and then we've got bananas, macadamias, pineapples, passion fruits, all of those guys, and we all come in an informal setting. It doesn't have, unlike the Queensland Horticulture Council, which sort of has a bit of structure, it's more of an informal group. But at least we're getting together and talking, and about once every 3 months we get together and have a chat about all the issues that are impacting on Queensland horticulture, and they're sometimes national issues as well. And a lot of those groups are members of the newly formed Voice of Horticulture. So we've just got a bit of a thing where we've got the regions, we've got the commodities, and then hopefully we're feeding into the national group, which is the Voice of Horticulture, or AusVeg, and it looks like AusVeg is actually going to join the Voice of Horticulture, so we might actually be starting to get to the golden outcome, which is a single voice for horticulture, because I think horticulture has been really neglected as a consequence of being seen to be 44 small organisations who can't agree on anything. It's been very easy for government to dismiss us. We're the third largest agricultural industry in Australia. In Queensland, we are the second largest agricultural industry, and yet and in Queensland we're the only one that's increasing like that. And yet the way that horticulture is treated compared to, say, beef or some of the other grains or even sugar is criminal. And I think we, as people who are, I guess, custodians of the Voice of Horticulture, need to be really aware of that. We've got a lot of work to do to be seen as a collective voice, and it's really important that we do that. And I recognise that there are really important and legitimate reasons why individual commodities have to have their own identity, particularly around things like biosecurity, because, you know, the bugs that like pineapples are completely different to the bugs that like papaya and all of those kind of things. But I think I think it's happening. We need to step above that, and we need to say, what are the things that unite us? What are the things that bring us together rather than the things that separate us? And we need to start singing from that song sheet, and we need to start pushing that agenda with government. And I think, unfortunately, in horticulture, perhaps, you know, you look at sugar, for example, it's a bulk commodity, everyone grows their sugar, it goes to the mill, blah, 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 blah. You're not competing with your neighbour. In horticulture, unfortunately, there's a strong sense of competition between individual businesses. They're saying, well, if Coles is buying their broccoli, they're not going to buy my broccoli. So there's some issues there that are difficult to overcome. But I think that the evidence is that even if every single Australian ate their 2 and 5, then we couldn't even supply it with what we currently grow. So I think there is a strong argument for, rather than having internal arguments about, or say fighting with our neighbours, saying, why don't we start looking at growing the pie? And I think the export area is starting to do that as well. Because if there's a market for everybody, then growers stop being price takers, which is one of the biggest issues, and start being price makers, and everybody can, there's room enough, I guess, in this industry for everybody to make a good business, but we have to work together, I think, to achieve that. I just guess in terms of the value chain, that's probably my reflection on the value chain, in that as an advocate, I can work in certain areas, like obviously we deal with issues around the supermarkets and concerns growers have. We deal with issues that growers have around the wholesale markets. We lobby government for changes in legislation. We work a lot in terms of the other parts, in terms of things like biosecurity, that sort of thing. So our whole focus is enabling the policy settings to be made that facilitate growers to be able to do the best business that they can, so the industry can flourish, I guess. So that's our role in the value chain. And I guess everybody in this room probably has a different role. Mine is a little bit maybe off to the side compared to a lot of yours. It's not that coalface kind of stuff that Sharon's doing. But I think we need strong advocates for our industry, because the political ear needs to be grabbed, and we need to have as many people as possible, ramming home that critical message that we're such a vital, important and flourishing industry. And I know it's a little bit of it's been bandied around a little bit, and I can't claim credit for it, but they're talking about now we've reached the end of the mining boom and we're at the beginning of the dining boom. So it's up to us as horticulture collectively to embrace that opportunity, and it's up to me in my advocacy role to do that policy setting stuff. It's up to Sharon to grow the best stuff that she can and push that kind of thing. And by being a leader on our board, that's a really important role. And I think together we can actually work to make this industry reach its full potential. So thank you for your time.